Greetings, folks. Wake up, South Africa. You are listening to the Coffee Conversation, and my name is Aphiwe Nqevu Dean.
Yes, I'm Dean Heystek, just a guy who gives a damn, and we're going to have a last insert, I think, hopefully on white privilege, and so much fun. White privilege. Finish it off.
You privileged fellow.
Yeah, I am. I have to admit it. What's been so amazing about this journey, even that we are, firstly, we never claim the monopoly on knowledge or truth. That's not what this is about. You're not sitting there going, I know the answers, and I'm not sitting here going, I know the answers. And in our interactions and discussing white privilege again, and in more depth, there's breakthroughs that we're finding. So in one way, and I know you might not like this term, but I'm going to shatter this image of white privilege for the negative thing that it's presented to be entirely on its own. I hope that we manage to achieve that today. So give me some...
Do you want to shatter it?
Well, I'll explain.
I'll tell you how to shatter white privilege. Move to Tembalete, I'll move to... where do you stay?
Where do I stay? Should we say?
Okay.
Woodorp. Maybe. But I was troubled tremendously after we spoke last time, thinking stuff through, because getting a grip on the subject is so emotionally intense that even for us who've been engaging for 3 years, there's still so many things that are offensive. Not even in what you say, but in the existence of these terms that are so misunderstood. Give a little bit more,
Okay, I'll just ask, you mentioned offense.
Yeah.
You mentioned there are many things that are offensive. And I do perceive that there's a lot of offense that I'm bringing your way when I'm pointing out that there's a thing called white privilege. Even if I'm not saying you have it, but just because you are white. And, okay, we can go far with this because...
Well, let me just say this. I want to acknowledge to you now, I am white and I do have privilege.
Amen. Amen. Okay, why are you offended? Why is the idea offensive when it's mentioned? Why is your knee-jerk offense and wanting to defend the position? Because if you can get past that, then you will be liberated.
I think you're 100% right. That's the right question that I think as a white person I had to ask myself. Why does it offend me so much when the term white privilege is used? I think there's a number of reasons. Number one, the first one is that so often when it's used in the form of an attack. And when you are attacked, the natural thing to do is to defend yourself. And I think that's the danger of the attack, the accusation of white privilege. If it's an argument, I can deal with it. And that's what we've been working through, the argument of it. And it's helped me tremendously.
And so the attack shuts you down from even realizing the reality of white privilege. Yeah. Because you are being attacked for it.
When somebody attacks me with it, what they're saying is, shut up, you don't have a voice. And because of that, I go, I'm lost.
And it's true. What you are saying, I will be one to admit that South Africa definitely has demonstrated that how white people have become irrelevant because of their privilege. There is truth to that, and I think it's deadly. I think it's damaging to society, even to the possible effort of transferring privilege to everybody.
Transferring privilege to everybody. We're breaking through stuff. I mean, you so often have joked with me and said, there's your white fragility. And again, knee-jerk, defend. What are you talking about, my white fragility?
I mean, let's think about the sun. I mean, the sun destroys you easily than
very quickly. I don't know why we call colors colors. I mean, I get born and I'm pink. I don't breathe, I turn blue. I lie in the sun, I go bright pink. I get cold. I think I get cold. I turn different colors, nobody else does. But the fragility aspect is actually real because at the moment we feel so irrelevant, we feel so excluded, we feel so not as if we're contributing any more with any relevance that is considered, and is making us feel fragile. And it validates even that statement, that there is a white fragility that does exist because we feel like we're under attack. Now, offense, you mentioned, very quickly, because I want you to carry on with where you were. There's 3 aspects to offense. You can do something offensive and I take offense because offense is in me. You can do something offensive and I don't take offense because offense is not in me. Or you can do something that's totally not offensive And I still take offense because offense is in me. Offense is actually something that is primarily in you, and it's actually registered by the level of maturity that you manage to handle. And I don't think that I've been very mature in the initial engagements of this discussion of white privilege. All the whites are sitting out there going, "You're such a dog, you're selling us out." But no, let us finish. We're actually going to get to a point.
Are you trying to say they must come down? You're about to pay them back for the humiliation you brought them?
Yeah, okay. No, I'm going to validate certain things for us fragile white morons.
Again, just finishing my attack here. White privilege plays out in big ways and in small ways. And we often talk about how the whites don't even consider this government their government. And they can afford to do so because in their circles, they've got sufficient structures to maintain their daily lives without depending on the government. And that's a privilege. That's a privilege.
Exactly.
Really. It's a real privilege when you consider how terrible and horrible government can be.
Yes.
It's a privilege. But then for the time it started, they didn't even give it a shot.
No.
They didn't give it a shot. And it's a privilege that they could decide to stay out of blacks and their lives.
And step back.
And step back and not be.
Because we can look after ourselves.
That's a privilege.
Where if we had nothing, we wouldn't have been able to do that.
You'd have even protested. I
would have come to you for lessons on how to toy.
Exactly. I mean, now you're coming for Farm Med, and now you want to know Zuma must go.
While I'm lying in bed, traumatized by some of the thoughts that are not allowing to let me go. And I must say, I was up all night, but it wasn't uncomfortable. The discomfort of what we are experiencing in this exploration doesn't upset me. The thoughts upset me, but the fact that those thoughts upset me, I'm enjoying. So I'm lying in bed, and these are some of the thoughts. I just want to read it. We all have basic human rights. And this, I'm hoping, will highlight certain things for us in South Africa. We've got the right to life, not to be aborted, not to be thrown into a dumpster. We got the right to life. We got the right to be born into a family, potentially of two parents. These are basic human rights. We have the right to an education. We have the right to, when we grow up, to even provide for our families. And these are rights and not privileges. Am I correct in saying that?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Because the definition in the dictionary that says what privileges are specifically states that education is not a privilege. I mean, it's a right, it's not a privilege. So I'm going through this in my head because I've always said that education, I've actually said the opposite. I've said that education is a privilege. It isn't actually a right. And people said, yeah, but that's just a point of privilege. And I always used to object to that because I was scared of this word privilege. But notice that although in general, we all seem to agree that they are rights, as soon as a white person has it, it's called a privilege.
Yeah, I can't identify with that because I'm not aware of that. Maybe you, because you are white, so the accusation comes to you. So.
Well, one of the privileges, what many people say often is, okay, we're all alive, so we've all enjoyed the right to life, but you coming from a two-parent family, that's just your white privilege. Having an education, that's just your white privilege.
That doesn't make sense because in order for you to be born, two people must have come together. So everybody should have two parents.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody should have two parents. So that can't be something that's...
So this is the tension that I was having as a white person, saying that, oh, you've just got white privilege. But let me finish the thought process because a reality came to me, is that whenever those things there, those basic human rights were referred to as rights, it was always talking about the black people. But as soon as white people have that, it's called a privilege. And I didn't know how to grapple with that. So because I'm grateful to have those things, I consider them to be a privilege. So those basic human rights, the fact that I wasn't aborted, the fact that I wasn't thrown into a dumpster, the fact that I have got two parents, the fact that I have had an education, the fact that I am able, even partly in this bloody economy, to look after my family. I've been so grateful for that I've recognized it within myself as a privilege and not just a basic right. So I'm grateful for the things that in the accusation of white privilege, I'm told that I should be ashamed of and guilty for. And I haven't known, and I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Do you get the thing of what I'm saying?
It sounds like you've been victimized by people who were not well-meaning when they were pointing out your privilege, because some of the things they called privilege were not things that were supposed to be called privilege. If everybody has a right to life and a right to education, and that is universally agreed upon, why when it's you, why should it be considered to be anything less than what it is?
Okay.
So it's people who were malicious even in their pointing out of that fact. I think we need to consider the aspect of white privilege. In fact, we have from a reality point of view and perspective, and reality will be rational, there will be a thought process, there will be reasons that will be provided, and it will be logical to look at. Let's not try and argue out the intentions of humanity, because there is evil in the hearts of men.
Yeah.
And to justify their low performance and all that, they may easily want to make you feel bad for your performance. So
that's been the struggle as a white person on the term white privilege as the accusation. See, I don't want to destroy the term white privilege. I want to destroy the accusation, because you've just described that it's the malicious intent of the use of the word that is so often used that is what's getting white people to go, it doesn't exist. It's what drove me to go, it doesn't exist. And that's why I've had to look so hard as to, there is something, I know that I have privilege, yet there's this accusation. So I want to take it out of accusation and bring it to the reality that it exists. And even if it's an argument, at least an argument is still a constant backwards and forwards. You know,
it exists, and it's not even a proof or an evidence that there should be expropriation without compensation.
Yeah.
It exists, but it doesn't even justify that concept, that thought. It exists.
Yeah.
It exists, and dealing with that and interacting with that, we may even be finding breakthroughs, how we can be kind to one another in edifying ways, because we know exactly where we are. We can be sensitive even in dealing with each other, because you are at a place of privilege, and when a black person, colored person approaches you, they are approaching somebody that they've believed to be superior for generations.
Yep.
That is a privilege.
Yep.
You have to be sensitive to that and be like, okay,
Yep.
I have to give this person a hand up so that they can be on the same place with me when they communicate with me.
Correct.
And not give me undue glory.
This is kind of what opened my eyes to what you're saying, is untimely sip of coffee into flow. You know. So I'm grateful. Because I'm grateful, I consider it a privilege. I'm told that it's a shame in terms of the accusation, that I should be ashamed of it. And in the accusation, I'm told that it's a terrible thing. Okay? In the argument side, and this is what came to me, is that I realized that many, in fact, in South Africa, were denied these rights previously, entirely. The only right that those in South Africa who are alive today have enjoyed is the right to life. How many of them are born into a two-parent family in the poorer ends, in the black communities, in the colored communities? Almost none. They don't have that right. They don't have the right of a proper education. They have the right to it, but they don't have a proper education. So it's one thing having the right to having it. It's another thing actually having it. Realizing that me having it and feeling privileged is actually part of the privilege. And realizing it is a privilege, and that's why white privilege does exist. And to call it just white privilege in the form of accusation is racist, but in an argument, it's not racist. It's just acknowledging, listen guys, there's 4.5 million white people in a country of almost 60 million. Probably if it's 4.5 million, 4.4 million have had the right to life, have been born into a two-parent family, have gotten education. When you grow up, you can provide for your families. And these things you've got, and they are a privilege, even though they're also rights. So I'd like to say to the dictionary definition, listen, education is a right, but it's also a privilege. And if we can see that as white people, then we can realize we've got privilege that so many people don't have. Forget about the reasons why, blaming it's because they don't want to XYZ. We'll get on to black entitlement just now. Another hard one. But they don't have it. Not even these basic human rights, and that's why there's resentment. That's why they resent. That's why there's an accusation.
White privilege should be looked at by someone who wants to feel guilty less than a condemning statement. It's not a condemnation. It's not cause for condemnation, but it's an appeal for conviction. It's not cause for condemnation, but you should have some conviction that I am a little more privileged than the other person. I'm not condemned because of it.
Yeah.
I'm not condemned because of it. I'm still happy with who I am, my race, and because mostly white people, I may be wrong, they don't view themselves in terms of racial awareness. It's not. You know, black people are very in tune and in touch with the fact that I am black. Oh, poor me in this world. The worst
we
thing
don't
that
think
could
you're in
ever-
tune. We think you're obsessed.
You know,
No, you're right. It's what
yeah, you know, it's like the worst thing that could ever happen to a child is the child to be born black in the society that we are witnessing or we've witnessed. But obviously, with growth, you can grow to actually appreciate your individuality and your race and find ways to navigate through and not find reasons to be deadly to society because you are black.
And I think that if we as white people can acknowledge the fact that we have got privileges that black people don't and be sensitive to the black, we can maybe even help contribute to that emotional growth of blacks in general. Now I want to ask you a question, help me. You said, okay, when white privilege is used, we can use it positively and blah. When it's thrown at me just as the accusation, you just awful, you whites, you terrible, you're never going to change, we need to cut the head off, blah, blah, blah. How do I manage that? How do we as white people, how do you suggest we manage that? Because it comes there are a few people who will say it the way you've said it and realize it the way that I've realized it because we've had the conversation. Most times when it's used in the political platform, in the media platform, in the movie platform, the entertainment platform, it's certainly not used in the framework of what we're taking, which is why so many white people come up against it. Now I've realized, okay, I don't need to come up against it in society. I need to recognize it. I need to engage with it. How would you suggest I deal with it, manage it when it comes as the accusation? Because do I walk away?
Well, it depends, because then when you want to find ways of dealing with it, is the person willing to even engage you, the person who's saying that to you? Or is that person just shouting? Is that person just shouting, not even hoping for a response? You know, so you have to weigh those. If it's something that is just said in the political platforms, now you know politicians are not the most rational people. I mean, over the years, I mean, even now, politicians are not up for logic. Politicians, they want to chant their rhetorics and they want to chant their slogans. So it's a pity. It's a pity, but then again, that is what we would say. Well, you know, there was a time when a black man wasn't listened to. There was a time when a black man wasn't listened to. Was that right? You know, that was not right. Is this right? So it's not right. So that's why we need conversations. Yes. That's why we need conversations, so that we can get people to be interested in talking and engaging each other instead of just shouting at each other. So I wouldn't say, I would think you don't want to be bothered by that. Don't let that overly bug you. When somebody's shouting, you know, they are shouting because they don't want to engage.
Yeah.
And cowards do that. It's like casting stones. It's like throwing stones at people. You don't want to, you know, throw punches and wait for punches to come. That's what the boxing is all about. A fair match. So people who are unfair is
Okay,
what,
so
yeah.
There's three states to any relationship. Children, parents with children, friends, family. There's three states that you can have in a relationship. Only three. The one is cooperation. I always talk about the little birds on the tree in Jungle Book. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Oh, what do you want to do? And just cooperation. Now, that's not necessarily until one says, well, let's go to the beach. Oh, I don't feel like going to the beach. Let's go to the mall. All right, let's go to the mall. That's cooperation. That's kind of considering each other with respect. Okay? And you're in a place of peace. Then what happens is we get to places like where you and I are. We're bringing the dishes and there's a conflict. Now, it's not necessarily a fight, it can become one, and it's always better to pursue peace. But sometimes a confrontation or a conflict is required, and if the point is to pursue peace and get back here, it's constructive. Now, I want to take white privilege and take it there. There is a tension between the black and the white people with regard to white privilege, and we allowing this confrontation to happen with the mindset of getting back to cooperation. Many people don't want cooperation. They want the conflict in order to get control, to become dominant, to become the pharaoh and as the master and the slave. And a lot of people, and this is what often happens, we see it in the silent majority, is they avoid the confrontation because they are agreeable, and they rather give up the position to be controlled, and they think it's peace, but it's not. It's slavery. That's when often the accusation comes, to try and get a position of control. I'm going to dominate you, I'm going to get over you, and that's why people have stood back from the accusation. There's only one alternative, or there's two alternatives to remain in that place. Is either you can remain in a position of control, which is terrible, it's tyranny. Apartheid had control over you, or there has to be a separation. And that's what happens in every single relationship. When I'm confronted with somebody who wants to get into the conflict, not to resolve, but to get control, how do I manage that?
Somebody wanting to control you.
Control white people, control me in the argument, win the argument, not...
Okay, are you talking about government, or are you talking about society?
Society is not as threatening as government. So it's in the media. Most of the arguments that come in terms of the accusations is to get control over the white people, is what we feel.
But government controls everybody, not just white people.
Sure.
But maybe it's because the government is black, that's why you feel like it's targeting you as a white person.
Yes, in a certain way, maybe it's because the government's black. And I realize that the easiest target on the South African area of South Africa is the white person, because we're the ones who've caused the most trouble in the last 100 years or so. And the rhetoric is drive them to the sea, get them out, cut off their heads, kill the poor. So we feel threatened that our lives are at stake, and a lot of, we'll get there, that's a different one. When it's not about having the confrontation or the argument or the discussion in order to get back to cooperation, but it's about getting control. How do I manage that? How do we as white people manage that? I don't know if we can even answer that.
Look, now we are talking about the government, right? Government controlling. The government controls everybody. The government doesn't just control white people. They don't just want to control white people. They control everybody. Look at what's happening.
But you're talking about white privilege.
And white privilege. Like white privilege. You know, we can talk about other things when we think about this, because in my mind, there is more control happening in the space where black people live than there is control happening in the space where white people live.
In your mind?
In my mind, there's more control.
And it might
the police presence and enforcing things. It's more in the township that I see that. And now I don't live in the white area, so I don't know how much is the police presence. And I'm talking about the police here as the arm of the government to control.
Yeah.
You know, and so how much of control is there by the police in the white communities? And so how would this control look like that the government seeks to impose on white people?
Let's get into that in the next session. We've got a few seconds left. I think in concluding this at the moment, one of the things you mentioned right now is the government's in control of everybody. And how do we deal with that? The only way to take it out of the government's hands is to deal with each other and determine what we want instead of allowing them to dictate to us their agenda.
Social power.
Social power. Socialism. Woo! Okay, another topic that we're coming on to. I think if we can safely say as white people that we have got privilege and we do enjoy that privilege, let's not abuse it and be sensitive that 80% of South Africa has never ever had what we've got. My name is Dean Heystek, and I'm just a guy who gives a damn.
My name is Aphiwe, the other side of the story.